The Rogue Princess and the Cursed Alpha. Chains of the Forgotten. The Fallen Princess. The iron collar around Arya Silvercrest's neck was heavy, but not as heavy as the weight of her memories. She sat in the corner of a rusted cage, her once beautiful silver gown now torn and stained with mud and blood. Around her, dozens of other cages held wolves in various states of despair. Some whimpered. Some growled. Arya did neither. She simply stared ahead with eyes that had once commanded respect from an entire kingdom. 3 months ago, she had been Princess Arya, daughter of Alpha Supreme Matthias Silvercrest, beloved by her people and destined to rule the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories. 3 months ago, her world had burned to ashes in a single night. The attack had come without warning. Rogues, they said. A massive army of outcasts and exiles who had somehow coordinated an assault sophisticated enough to breach the legendary Silvercrest defenses. Her father had fought until his last breath. Her mother had died protecting the younger cubs in the nursery. Her brother had fallen on the palace steps, his sword still in his hand. Arya had survived only because her personal guard, Marcus, had knocked her unconscious and smuggled her out through the servant tunnels. She had woken 3 days later in a merchant's cart, alone, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a note from Marcus that simply read, "Live. Avenge us." But living as a rogue was harder than dying as a princess. Without a pack, without identification papers, without money, Arya had been easy prey for the slavers who prowled the borderlands. They had caught her stealing bread from a market stall, and before she could shift and fight, they had clamped a silver collar around her throat, cutting off her connection to her wolf. The underground auction. Lot 47. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the underground cavern. Female wolf, approximately 22 years old, excellent condition despite recent capture. Notice the silver eyes, gentlemen. Rare bloodline. Could be from one of the extinct noble families. Arya was dragged onto the wooden platform, her hands bound behind her back. Bright magical lights illuminated her face, and she could feel hundreds of eyes examining her like she was a piece of meat. She kept her chin high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. The cavern was packed with wealthy wolves from various packs. Some were here for labor. Others for more sinister purposes. Arya recognized several crests and colors. The Ironpaw Traders. The Blood Moon Raiders. The Shadowfang collectors who specialized in rare wolves for breeding programs. Bidding starts at 5,000 gold, the auctioneer announced. 6,000, a voice called from the left. 8,000, another countered. Arya scanned the crowd, memorizing faces. If she survived this, if she ever regained her freedom, she would remember every single person in this room. They would all pay 10,000 gold. The voice came from the back of the cavern, deep and cold as winter frost. The entire crowd fell silent. Arya's eyes searched for the speaker and found him standing in the shadows at the rear of the space. He was tall, impossibly tall, with broad shoulders draped in a black cloak. His face was partially hidden, but she could see sharp cheekbones and a jaw carved from granite. Power radiated from him in waves so strong that even through her silver collar, Arya could feel it pressing against her skin. "That's the Cursed King," someone whispered nearby. "Alpha Damien Nightshade," another murmured. "What's he doing here?" The auctioneer's hand trembled as he raised his gavel. 10,000 gold from Alpha Damien Nightshade. Going once, going twice, sold. The emotionless king. Arya was unchained from the platform but immediately reshackled with new bonds that bore the Nightshade crest, a black wolf howling beneath a moonless sky. 2 guards escorted her through the crowd toward the tall figure in the back. As she approached, Arya got her first clear look at her new owner. Damien Nightshade was perhaps 30 years old, with black hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes the color of midnight, so dark they seemed to swallow light. His face was beautiful in a harsh, dangerous way, like a blade forged by a master craftsman. But there was something wrong with those eyes. They were completely empty, devoid of any emotion whatsoever. "Can she work?" Damien asked the auctioneer, his voice flat and mechanical. "Oh yes, Your Majesty. Strong, healthy, very capable." "Then she'll do." Damien cut him off. He looked at Arya for the first time, and she felt his gaze sweep over her like cold water. There was no lust, no cruelty, no curiosity. Nothing. It was like being examined by a statue. "What's your name?" he asked. Arya considered lying, but something in those empty eyes made her speak the truth. "Arya. Can you read and write, Arya?" She nodded. "Good. You'll work in my library. Follow my guards." He turned away, already losing interest. But as Damien moved past her, Arya felt something strange. A tingling sensation ran down her spine, warm and electric, completely at odds with the freezing presence of the man himself. Her wolf, Luna, who had been silent and trapped behind the silver collar for weeks, suddenly stirred. "Mate," Luna whispered faintly in her mind. "Mate, mate, mate." Arya's blood ran cold. No. It wasn't possible. The moon goddess wouldn't be that cruel. Journey to Nightshade. The journey to the Nightshade territory took 3 days by carriage. Arya was given clean clothes, food, and water, but she was kept in silver chains the entire time. The guards who accompanied her were professional and silent, never speaking to her or each other. Through the carriage window, Arya watched the landscape change from the barren borderlands to dense pine forests and eventually to the dark, imposing mountains that marked Nightshade territory. The kingdom was legendary, not for its wealth or beauty, but for its power and the mystery surrounding its ruler. Everyone knew the story of Alpha Damien Nightshade. 10 years ago, he had been a different man, warm, passionate, and beloved by his people. Then he had fallen in love with a beautiful she-wolf named Isabella. On the night of their mating ceremony, Isabella had revealed herself to be a witch in disguise, sent by Damien's enemies. She had cursed him with a spell that stripped away his ability to feel any emotion whatsoever. Without emotions, Damien had become the perfect weapon. He couldn't feel fear, so he was unstoppable in battle. He couldn't feel mercy, so his enemies found none. He couldn't feel love, so he had no weaknesses to exploit. Under his cold rule, Nightshade had become the most feared kingdom in the realm. But at what cost? Arya had heard whispers that Damien barely ate, rarely slept, and existed more like a machine than a living creature. Some said the curse was slowly killing him, that without emotions to anchor his soul, he was gradually fading away. The Nightshade Palace. The palace was a fortress of black stone and iron gates, built into the side of a mountain. It was beautiful in a brutal way, all sharp angles and towering spires that seemed to pierce the sky. Arya was led through massive doors, down torchlit corridors, and finally into a vast library that took her breath away. The room was circular, with shelves stretching from floor to ceiling, packed with thousands of books. A spiral staircase led to multiple levels, and large windows let in streams of moonlight. It was the most beautiful thing Arya had seen since the destruction of her home. "You will organize these books," said the head guard, a stern woman named Captain Rena. "You will clean this room. You will maintain the records. You will not leave this wing without permission. You will not speak to the Alpha unless spoken to first. Break any rule, and you'll be sent to the mines." "Understood?" "Understood," Arya replied quietly. "Good. Your quarters are through that door. You start tomorrow at dawn." Captain Rena removed Arya's traveling chains but left the silver collar in place. "Don't try to escape. The collar is magically bound to the palace. If you cross the boundary, it will choke you unconscious, and you'll be dragged back." As the guards left, Arya explored her small room adjoining the library. It was simple but clean, a bed, a desk, a wash basin, and a window that looked out over the dark forest. It was a far cry from her royal chambers in Silvercrest, but it was better than a cage. She sat on the bed and finally let herself feel the crushing weight of her situation. She was a slave in the palace of the cursed king. Her pack was destroyed. Her family was dead. And worst of all, her wolf was insisting that this emotionless, cursed man was her fated mate. "This can't be real," Arya whispered to Luna. "The moon goddess wouldn't pair me with him." "The bond doesn't lie," Luna replied weakly. "I feel it." "Don't you?" Arya did feel it. Beneath the fear and grief and rage, there was a pull toward Damien Nightshade, a magnetic force that made her want to find him, to be near him. It was instinct, primal and undeniable. But Arya had learned to ignore her instincts. Instinct had told her father to trust his beta, and that trust had gotten everyone killed. Instinct was what separated civilized wolves from rogues. She would not be ruled by instinct. First encounter. Arya threw herself into her work. The library was in chaos, books misfiled and records scattered, clearly neglected for years. She worked from dawn until midnight, organizing, cleaning, cataloging. The work kept her mind occupied and her hands busy. 3 days passed before she saw Damien again. She was high on a ladder, shelving books on the 3rd level, when she heard footsteps below. She looked down and saw him standing in the center of the room, looking up at her with those empty midnight eyes. "You've made progress," he observed, his voice as emotionless as ever. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Arya kept her tone neutral and respectful. "Come down. I need you to find something." Arya descended the ladder carefully. Up close, the mate bond was stronger, pulling at her chest like an invisible rope. She could smell him now, pine, smoke, and something darker, like the air before a storm. Her wolf whimpered with longing. Damien didn't seem to notice her discomfort. "I need all records related to the Silvercrest pack. The kingdom that fell 3 months ago." Arya's heart stopped. She kept her face carefully blank. "May I ask why, Your Majesty?" "No." Damien turned away. "Bring them to my study when you find them." He left before Arya could respond. She stood frozen, her mind racing. Why would Damien Nightshade want information about Silvercrest? Had he been involved in the attack? Was he the one who had funded the rogues? Her grief transformed into something sharper, hotter. Rage. The investigation begins. Over the next week, Arya searched the library for every document related to Silvercrest. She found treaties, trade agreements, historical records, and most damning of all, correspondence between Damien and her father from years ago. The letters were cold and formal, discussing border disputes and territory negotiations, but they proved that Damien had been in contact with her father. But as she read deeper, Arya found something that didn't fit. The last letter, dated just weeks before the attack, was from her father to Damien. It read, "Your warning has been received and is appreciated. I have increased patrols on the eastern border as you suggested. If your intelligence about traitors within my own court is accurate, I will root them out. The Silvercrest pack is in your debt." Arya read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking. Damien had warned her father about traitors? He had tried to help? She needed more information. She needed to talk to him. But Damien was impossible to find. He rarely slept in the palace, spending most nights in his war room or patrolling the borders himself. When he was in the palace, he was surrounded by advisors and guards. Arya began to observe the palace routines, learning the guard rotations, the servant schedules, the secret passages that honeycombed the ancient building. She was planning her escape, yes, but she was also planning something more dangerous. She was planning to confront the cursed king and demand the truth. The crack in the ice. On the 10th night of her captivity, Arya was working late in the library when she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was coming from the shadows near the eastern window, a low, pained groan. She grabbed a candlestick as a weapon and moved quietly toward the sound. There, slumped against the wall beneath the window, was Damien. Even in the dim light, she could see that something was wrong. His face was pale and covered in sweat. His hands clutched his chest, and his breathing was ragged and shallow. "Your Majesty?" Arya approached cautiously. Damien's eyes snapped open. Stay back. But Arya didn't stay back. Something in his voice, a tiny crack in that emotionless facade, drew her closer. You're hurt. I said stay back. This time there was real emotion in his voice. Pain. Fear. Anger. Arya dropped to her knees beside him, ignoring the command. Up close, she could see dark veins spreading across his neck and jaw, pulsing with sickly black light. The curse, she realized. The curse was killing him. What do you need? She asked urgently. Medicine? A healer? Nothing can help. Damien's voice cracked. The curse, it's getting worse. Being near you makes it worse. What? Damien looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was genuine emotion in those midnight eyes. Confusion. Longing. Agony. You, he said hoarsely. Something about you makes me feel. And feeling is killing me. The mate bond, Arya realized. Their bond was fighting the curse, trying to restore Damien's emotions. But the curse was fighting back, tearing him apart in the process. Then I'll leave, Arya said, starting to stand. I'll request a transfer. Damien's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron-strong, desperate. No. Don't go. They stared at each other in the candlelight. Slowly, carefully, Arya sat back down. She didn't pull her hand away, and Damien didn't let go. Tell me about the Silvercrest attack, Arya said softly. Tell me what you know. Damien was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice rough with pain and returning emotion, he began to speak. Your father wrote to me 6 months before the attack. He suspected that someone in his inner circle was plotting against him, but he didn't know who. I sent my best scouts to investigate. They discovered that your father's beta, a wolf named Garrett Thornwood, had been secretly meeting with rogue leaders and foreign powers. He was planning a coup. Arya's blood turned to ice. Garrett. Her father's most trusted advisor, his closest friend since childhood. Garrett, who had bounced her on his knee when she was a cub. Garrett, who had promised to protect her family. My scouts sent word to your father, Damien continued, his voice growing stronger as anger bled into it. But the message never arrived. My messenger was killed on the road. By the time I realized what had happened and sent soldiers to help, it was too late. Silvercrest was burning. Your family was dead. And Garrett Thornwood had vanished. Why didn't you tell anyone? Arya demanded, tears streaming down her face. Why didn't you hunt him down? I did hunt him. Damien's eyes flashed with fury, with real, burning emotion. I've been hunting him for 3 months. He's been hiding, protected by the same foreign powers who funded his coup. But I will find him, Arya Silvercrest. And when I do, I will make him pay for every drop of royal blood he spilled. Arya stared at the man before her. The cursed king, who supposedly felt nothing, was shaking with rage on her behalf. The mate bond pulsed between them, warm and bright. You know who I am, she whispered. I've known since the moment I saw you at the auction. Damien released her wrist and reached up to touch her face with trembling fingers. I felt something when I looked at you. It was faint, barely there, but it was something. So I bought you. I brought you here. I've been trying to figure out how you're breaking my curse. We're mates, Arya said. The bond is fighting the curse. Damien closed his eyes. I know. I've known from the beginning. But I'm dying, Arya. The curse is too strong. It's eating me alive from the inside. In 6 months, maybe less, I'll be gone. Then we break the curse, Arya said fiercely. We find the witch who cast it and make her reverse it. She's dead. I killed her myself 3 years after she cursed me. Then we find another way. Arya took his hand in both of hers. You tried to save my family. You've been hunting the real killer. You bought me at that auction to protect me, didn't you? Not to own me. Damien's lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile. It was the first smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his face from harsh to heartbreaking. You're too valuable to leave in that place. Even if you weren't my mate. Then let me help you, Arya said. Let me try to break this curse. Let me help you find Garrett. Let me. Your Majesty. The door burst open, and Captain Rena ran in, her face pale with panic. We have a situation. There's been an attack on the eastern border. Dozens of rogues, all wearing the Thornwood crest. Damien was on his feet instantly, all weakness gone, replaced by cold, lethal focus. Gather my commanders. Prepare my armor. Yes, Your Majesty. Captain Rena hesitated. And the girl? Damien looked at Arya. Lock her in her quarters. Post guards. No one gets in or out. No. Arya jumped to her feet. Let me fight. I'm Silvercrest royalty. I've been trained since I was 5 years old. I can help. You're staying here where it's safe. Damien's voice was back to its emotionless tone, but his eyes betrayed him. Fear flickered in their depths, fear for her. Damien. That's an order. He turned and strode toward the door, Captain Rena following. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. Stay alive, Princess. We're not done yet. Then he was gone, and Arya was alone in the library, the mate bond pulling painfully at her chest as Damien moved farther and farther away. She looked down at her hands, still warm from his touch. The silver collar around her throat seemed to burn. Garrett Thornwood was here. The man who had destroyed her family, who had slaughtered her pack, was on Nightshade territory right now. And Arya would be damned if she let him escape again. Part 2, Shadows of Truth, 2000 words. Breaking the collar. Arya paced her small room like a caged animal, listening to the sounds of the palace mobilizing for war. Boots thundered in the hallways. Orders were shouted. The clash of weapons and armor echoed through the stone corridors. Outside her window, she could see soldiers assembling in the courtyard, their dark armor gleaming in the torchlight. Damien stood at the center, speaking with his commanders. Even from this distance, she could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the mechanical precision of his movements. The brief flash of emotion she'd witnessed in the library was gone, locked away again behind the curse's walls. 2 guards stood outside her door. Through the wood, she could hear them muttering nervously about the attack. Thornwood's rogues are fierce, one was saying. They fight like demons. The king will crush them, the other replied with confidence. He always does. Arya's hands clenched into fists. She couldn't stay here. She wouldn't stay here. Garrett Thornwood had taken everything from her, and she would not hide in a locked room while Damien fought her battle. She looked down at the silver collar, studying its construction. It was masterwork, created by a skilled enchanter, with runes carved into the metal that glowed faintly blue. The collar suppressed her shift, cut her off from Luna, and would strangle her if she tried to leave the palace grounds. But Arya had been trained by the best tutors in Silvercrest. She knew magic. She knew enchantments. And she knew that every spell had a weakness. She grabbed a hairpin from her small dresser and knelt on the floor, scratching a counter-rune into the stone. It was dangerous, attempting to break an enchantment without proper tools or training. If she made a mistake, the collar could kill her instantly. But fear of death had died with her family. All she had left was rage and purpose. Luna's awakening. It took 30 minutes and 3 failed attempts before Arya finally scratched the correct sequence of runes. The silver collar around her throat sparked, hissed, and then split open with a crack of breaking metal. The relief was instant and overwhelming. Her connection to Luna flooded back like water breaking through a dam. Her senses sharpened. Her strength returned. And for the first time in months, she felt whole. Finally, Luna growled in her mind. Now let's hunt. Arya shifted. Her bones cracked and reformed, her skin sprouting silver fur that matched her name and royal bloodline. She was smaller than a normal warrior wolf, built for speed rather than strength, but her fangs were just as sharp. She crashed through the window, ignoring the shouts of alarm from her guards. Glass rained down as she hit the courtyard 3 floors below, landing on all fours. Wolves scattered in surprise. Soldiers reached for their weapons. "Stop!" Captain Rena commanded. "The slave has escaped. Capture her." But Arya was already running. She bolted across the courtyard, weaving between startled soldiers, and crashed through the palace gates before anyone could react. The guards stationed there tried to grab her, but she was too fast, too desperate. The collar's boundary magic would have stopped her old self. But without the collar, nothing could hold her. She ran into the dark forest, following the sounds of battle that echoed from the eastern border. The battlefield. Arya found the battle by following the scent of blood and smoke. She emerged from the tree line onto a horrific scene. The eastern border was a killing field, with bodies of rogues and nightshade soldiers alike scattered across torn earth. At the center of the chaos stood Damien, his black armor splattered with red, his sword singing through the air as he cut down enemies with mechanical precision. He was magnificent and terrifying, moving like death itself, feeling nothing as he killed. But the rogues kept coming. They were organized, well-armed, and fought with the desperation of wolves who had nothing to lose. Arya spotted him then. Standing on a ridge overlooking the battle, directing his forces with hand signals, was Garrett Thornwood. He looked older than she remembered, with streaks of gray in his brown hair and new scars crossing his face. But it was definitely him. The man who had been like an uncle to her. The man who had murdered her family. Rage consumed her. Arya charged up the ridge, her silver fur flashing in the moonlight. Garrett's guards saw her coming and moved to intercept, but she was faster. She leaped over the first guard, twisted in midair to avoid the second, and landed directly in front of Garrett. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by shock. "Arya? You're alive?" Arya shifted back to human form, standing naked and furious before him. "You killed them. You killed my father, my mother, my brother. You betrayed everything Silvercrest stood for." Garrett's expression hardened. "Your father was weak. He refused to take the territories that were rightfully ours. He preached peace when we should have been conquering. I did what needed to be done. You're a traitor and a coward." Arya's voice was cold as ice. "And I'm going to kill you." "You can try, little princess." Garrett shifted into his wolf form, a massive brown beast twice Arya's size. They collided in a fury of fangs and claws. 2 battles. Arya fought like a demon. She was smaller than Garrett, but she was faster, and she had been trained by the best warriors in Silvercrest. She ducked under his snapping jaws, raked her claws across his flank, and danced away before he could retaliate. But Garrett was a seasoned warrior, and he was fighting to survive. He used his size to his advantage, trying to pin her down, to crush her beneath his weight. They rolled down the ridge, snapping and snarling. Arya tasted blood, hers and his. Pain exploded in her shoulder as Garrett's teeth found purchase. She yelped but twisted free, leaving fur and skin in his mouth. Below them, Damien heard her cry. His head snapped up, and for the first time since the battle began, emotion flickered across his face. Horror. He saw Arya fighting on the ridge. He saw Garrett's massive form overwhelming her smaller body. And something inside him, something the curse had locked away for 10 years, broke free. "Arya!" His roar shook the battlefield. Damien abandoned his position and ran toward the ridge, cutting through rogues like they were nothing. His commanders called after him, confused by the sudden break in his usual tactical brilliance. The cursed king never abandoned his position. He never showed emotion. He never acted on impulse. But the curse was cracking, and Damien Nightshade was remembering what it meant to feel terror. The truth revealed. Arya was losing. Garrett had her pinned, his jaws closing around her throat. She could feel her windpipe beginning to collapse. Her vision darkened at the edges. Then Garrett was gone, ripped away from her by a force like a hurricane. Damien, still in human form but moving with inhuman speed and strength, had grabbed Garrett by the scruff and thrown him 20 feet across the ridge. "Don't touch her." Each word came out in a snarl, dripping with emotion, rage, fear, protective fury. Garrett shifted back to human form, spitting blood. "So the rumors are true. The cursed king has found his weakness. How touching." "You killed the Silvercrest pack," Damien said, advancing on Garrett. Dark energy crackled around his hands, the power of an alpha king unleashed. "You slaughtered innocents. You destroyed an entire royal bloodline." "I created an opportunity," Garrett shouted back. "With Silvercrest gone, the northern territories were vulnerable. I offered them to the highest bidder. Several kingdoms were interested in funding my little coup." "Who?" Arya rasped, struggling to her feet. Her throat was bruised, but she could breathe. "Who paid you?" Garrett smiled, blood-stained teeth gleaming in the moonlight. "The same witch who cursed your precious king. Isabella Blackthorn. She's not dead, Your Majesty. She's been very much alive, and she's been planning her revenge for 10 years. Damien went very still. "That's impossible." "I killed her." "You killed a body double." Garrett laughed. "Isabella has been hiding in the Shadowlands, growing her power. She wanted Silvercrest destroyed because Princess Arya's bloodline held the key to breaking your curse. The ancient Silvercrest magic could have saved you. So Isabella made sure the bloodline was wiped out." He looked at Arya with mock sympathy. "You're the last one, Princess. The last Silvercrest wolf in existence. And Isabella wants you dead." "Why?" Arya demanded. "Why does she care if Damien's curse is broken?" "Because she's obsessed with him." Garrett shrugged. "She cursed him because he rejected her love. She wanted him to suffer forever, unable to feel anything but pain. But if you break the curse, if he learns to feel again, her revenge is meaningless." Damien and Arya exchanged glances. The mate bond between them pulsed with shared understanding. "Where is she?" Damien asked quietly. The temperature dropped 10 degrees around him. Frost formed on the ground at his feet. "Come find her."